All right, welcome in everyone and quiet on set because I'm here to dive into the choice of Cabaret as UNCC's spring musical and its surprisingly significant relevance to today's society. I'll also be sharing with you how what was expected to be a silly little musical about a sexy dance club has been challenging the norm for decades and how it's not stopping anytime soon. I'm your host, Lindsay Madison, and this is Quiet on Set. Take your seats, everyone, because the University of North Carolina at Charlotte is doing a production of Cabaret as their 2026 spring musical. Now, when I first heard about this as a Charlotte student myself, I was like, okay, well, when I think Cabaret, I think sexy dance club, maybe a little bit of comedy, but I don't really think of it having much more significance other than that. And because of this, I decided that I wanted to do some research and see if it was really worth the watch. And turns out, it is a lot more relatable than some might think. So in today's episode, I wanted to dive into some of those themes that we see in the production and how it might be a little bit more relatable to you than you thought. Maybe this episode will help some of those who were thinking about going but not really sure. Maybe it will convince you to take a look at it. So some of the themes that we see in Cabaret specifically are a little bit of homosexuality, some hidden political agendas, and some prejudice relating to race, religion, or gender. And because of those themes, I think it might be worth a watch for you. So before we dive in, let's give a little bit of a summary. So, taking place in the 1930s Berlin, Germany, the musical Cabaret, which is based on the book by Joe Masteroff, follows a struggling American writer, Cliff Bradshaw, as he is visiting Berlin looking for inspiration for his next novel. On his first night there, he stumbles into the Kit Kat Club, a popular nightclub that hosts multiple cabaret performers. There he meets the gender-bending master of ceremonies, the MC, and the very talented British cabaret dancer Sally Bowles. The story follows not only the rocky romance between Sally and Cliff, but also another romance between characters Herr Schultz, a Jewish man who is boarding in the same house as Cliff during his stay in Berlin, and the German owner of the house, Fräulein Schneider. As the plot of the story progresses, the audience is drawn into the immersive and trying world of the Kit Kat Club, while simultaneously watching the beginning of the Nazi regime in Germany through the eyes of the characters. So when I first read this description, what I really noted was the fact that it was set in Nazi Germany, which adds a whole other layer to the musical than I initially expected, because listening to the title, obviously you expect cabaret dancers and a nightclub, but what you're not expecting is for it to be set in Nazi Germany. So that was a really interesting thing for me, and also that the production had faced a lot of changes and alterations throughout the years of its development. So I figured I would walk you guys through some of those changes so you guys can get a better understanding of how the cabaret that we see today came to be. So in 2022, a graduate student from the University of Oklahoma named Matthew Reynolds, he analyzed the adaptability and the undergone changes that cabaret has faced over the years in his graduate thesis paper, Catching Up with Cabaret, Finding Deeper Meaning in a Never-Ending Adaptation. So this was one of the only sources that I could find on this musical and its, changes throughout the years and its theme relevance. So I figured I would walk you guys through that today. So in his article, he starts by introducing the basic timeline of the musical's development. So Cabaret began in 1966 as a book-turned-musical, like I said before, by Joe Masteroff, and then it was also adapted into a film in 1972, which was directed by Bob Fosse, and then it was later developed into the show we know today. Reynolds compares the plotline of Cabaret to other musicals that we see during that same period of the 1960s, and how all of those other musicals kind of followed a very similar plot line that was very much repeated during that time. So the typical plot line you'd see for a 1960s musical was the formation and success of a romantic relationship between a man and a woman, and that would be the central plot device. And then the musical numbers and the dialogue and everything its only function was to progress that storyline, and it was to express the characters' like excessive joy throughout the storyline. There was hardly ever any down moments, and if there were, they were very few in these musicals. So Cabaret went against the grain with its double romance storyline and its tragic ending for the couples in question. And Cabaret also stood out because it had a hidden, sinister plotline and elusive setting of the Weimar era in Berlin. Please tell me if I'm pronouncing that wrong. So Reynolds later describes the backlash it received. Cabaret, when it first came out, a lot of people went into it expecting very similar to what we were expecting, or at least myself, what I was expecting when I first heard of it, that it was just going to follow the same plotline, a little romance, a little sexy fun, a little comedy, and then it was going to end. But Cabaret received a lot of backlash because at the end of the first act, it was revealed that the musical was not just about a sexy dance club, but that it was about Nazi Germany. And a lot of people at that point realized that the musical was not going to end well, and they decided to leave. So it did receive quite a bit of hate towards the beginning, but a lot of people actually really liked it, and they thought it was, very modern, very forward-thinking, and it actually became a huge hit. So after its runs starting in 1966, it became a film in 1972. And the film was drastically different from the production itself. It did make a lot of changes to the storyline and the characters and all of that. So naturally, when the film came out, or at least after it, the production itself went through a lot of changes before going back on stage. So some of the notable changes that it went through would be, there was a line in a very popular song called If You Could See Her, and it was sung by the MC, the Master of Ceremonies. And the song features the MC and a dancer in a gorilla suit, and it was meant to be humorous. The song lyrics describe their forbidden relationship and how the MC sees the gorilla dancer as the love of his life, despite her being a gorilla. And in the original production, the line said, "But if you could see her through my eyes, she isn't a meeskite at all." And it left the audience laughing from the comedic nature of the song, but still pondering the meaning of the word. The term meeskite is actually a Yiddish term for an ugly person, and the use of it connects to a song in a prominent, it connects the song to a prominent issue in the play of a German and Jewish marriage between two characters, and those two characters being Erschaltz and Fräulein Schneider. So the marriage was between them, and the song kind of connects itself to that. But it was very subtle, so it kind of hints at the themes of anti-Semitism in the show, but it wasn't, very brash in its mention of it. But after the film was made of Cabaret, then the line was changed to, "But if you could see her through my eyes, she wouldn't look Jewish at all. And the change creates obviously a more obvious and shocking revelation of the themes that will be presented in the duration of the show. And keep in mind that this song started at the beginning of Act 2. Like, this is the intro to Act 2. So after this song, it's very clear what the themes of the show will be for the duration of the time that you will be in the audience. So that was a pretty big change that they made to the production. And then some other notable changes would be that Sally's character, the character of Sally Bowles, was originally not a main lead character. Like, she only had, I think at most 3 songs, and 2 of them being ensemble songs. Like, she only had, I think, 1 very short solo in the very beginning stages of Cabaret, and she wasn't a main character. But after the movie came out, I think they decided to make her more of a prevalent character, and now she obviously has a lot more songs in the production that we see today. Not only that, but they added 2 more songs called Money Money and I Don't Care Much, which are both sung by the MC. And these just add to the capitalistic theming of the show and the anti-Semitic theming of the show. And so in the 1960s, so Cabaret initially came out to be a politically commentarial show. Like, it was intended to convey a message that related to the time it came out in. So in the 1960s, one of the most notable things that happened politically during the time would be the civil rights movement. And Cabaret was initially made to send a message about the civil rights movement and to be a political commentary in that way. So naturally, because of that, its adaptable ability throughout the years has also translated into it being a political commentary of a production throughout the years that it has been on Broadway. And I think that is just so fascinating to me that it has been able to adapt so much. And this was also something that was very fascinating to Reynolds as well. So one of the things that makes the commentarial nature of the show very obvious, one of the songs was Tomorrow Belongs to Me. And that one appears at the end of Act 1. And one of the more prominent characters that was a friend of Cliff Bradshaw's in the show, he reveals himself to be a Nazi at Herr Schultz and Fraulein Schneider's engagement party. And keep in mind, Herr Schultz is a Jewish man. So that revelation was very shocking for the audience, because the audience realizes that this whole time, any of the characters that they have grown attached to and seen in the show could be in danger of the Nazi regime. And that was a really big turn of events for them. Not only that, but the character who revealed himself to be a Nazi kind of flips a switch in himself, where he begins to see people differently based off of whether they are Jewish or not. And that was a very obviously relevant theme in the 1960s, but also is one that we see very often today in relation to gender norms and racial norms, religious norms, things like that. Like, there's a lot of prejudices that people hold against each other based off of those aspects of other people, and that is just something that is so relevant today. So keeping that in mind, Cabaret's adaptability throughout its years of production is not only the fact that the music and the production has adapted to be more modern, but also its commentary and its message remains the same, and it is still relevant to what we are seeing today. In the rest of his paper, Reynolds goes on to describe the significance of Sally Bowles' character and an analysis of Cabaret as a postmodern musical that never remains static. Reynolds says that Cabaret is a musical constantly in search of deeper meaning due to its ever-evolving interpretations and continuous adaptations of the musical score. He concludes by stating that while Broadway trends may have caught up with the evolution of Cabaret, society itself has a way to go. And that is true. Like, a lot of musicals that we see on Broadway today also have deeper meaning and don't just follow the same plot line every time you see them. And they themselves, like Broadway, has caught up to the modernized Cabaret that we saw in the 1960s. Like, it has caught up to some of those themes, but society itself still obviously has a long way to go. And I think Cabaret being the choice for the 2026 spring musical was honestly a pretty smart choice, I'd say. So it seems like what was considered to be a silly little spring musical about a sexy dance club had a little bit more meaning than you may have initially thought. That being said, if you weren't already planning to attend the production, maybe now you'll reconsider. And if you were planning to attend, I hope this episode has shed some light on what to look forward to when you watch. Not only is Cabaret a show full of laughter and dance, it is also one full of serious trials and meaning that hides under the surface. UNCC's production of Cabaret will be coming to their very own Belk Theater on April 16th through the 19th in 2026. To find out more and purchase tickets, visit coaa.charlotte.edu/theater/productions. That's coaa.charlotte.edu/theater/productions. With that, I'll leave you to get to your places, and remember to always keep quiet on set.